Hello and welcome to the JCN Clinic podcast show. I'm Jessica.
I'm Carissa.
And welcome to our last podcast of 2024. Can you believe it? I can't.
I can.
Although
I can because it's the 18th of December. So
and I ain't doing any more.
we're fucking done after this.
Yeah. So in the past years, we've done summaries at this time, summaries of the year. We've done how to get through Christmas with nutrition and blah, 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 all of the things you would expect from us. And if you want to hear about that, they're just a scroll back in our feed. I will put them in the show notes, actually. I could.
Yeah.
It's my favorite thing to do is put things in the show notes. It's so much fun.
Show notes. She loves writing them.
But today we're going to go rogue. We did mention this a few podcasts back, and if you follow us on socials, you will know this is what we're doing. So I'm actually going to share my relatively recent, it was end of November, Kosciuszko Ultra, my first Ultra, and talk about that. Share with you guys the day and also go behind the scenes with the nutrition side. But honestly, a lot more. And we have questions that you have sent to us. Carissa's got some too. I'm sure she'll fire them at me as we go. And there's some really interesting questions, some funny ones. But yeah, I think it's going to be lots of fun. Yeah.
I was just going to say, before you go into it, because I know we have such a diverse range of listeners, do you actually want to explain what an ultra is versus just a standard?
No, totally.
Standard event? Because I think, I've had people that don't even know what ultras are when I've mentioned that.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you weren't going to cover that, I'm just asking.
No, thanks. Well, it's funny you say that, and no shade to people that have already said this to me, but I've had quite a few people since have said, "Oh, congrats so much on your first marathon. Like, how'd the marathon go?" And I'm like, no, if you're not watching on YouTube, I get a nervous tick. It's like it wasn't a freaking marathon. Marathons are very different. So an ultra is anything over the distance of a marathon. So a marathon's around 42 kilometers, but also marathons, majority of the time, are done on the flat. They're often held in cities for that reason. There are marathons around the world that do have hilly courses, and then there are marathons that are done on the trails. So you can do them in that aspect, but generally a marathon is done on the flat. So an ultra is technically anything over 42 kilometers, and most ultras will start at 50 Ks and then they'll go up from there. So 50 Ks, 50 miles, 100 miles, 100 Ks. They're sort of like the classics, but you will get some distances in between. And then the other aspect is that ultras are a lot of the time done on trails. Again, not all the time. You can get ultras that aren't on trails, but I would say majority of ultras are done on more of a trail-like terrain. And with that comes mountains, and comes lots of more technical tracks. So what I mean by technical is you're not running just on the same flat road repetitively over and over and over. You're going up and down. The terrain under your feet will change. So it will be as you can imagine, if you're on a little dirt trail, it can be quite up and down in its own right. There can be tree roots, there can be debris, you're literally running through forest. So that's what technical means. You're often you better bloody be looking at where you're going, because there's things that can trip you and slow you down. There can be a lot of rocks where you're actually scrambling up and down rocks. So that will often, as you can imagine, slow you down and slow down these times, because again, a marathon is usually done very, very fast. Whereas the ultras done on the trails, definitely the elites do them crazy fast still, but you will see quite big differences in times because of literally going up mountains and the technicality of the terrain. So yeah, essentially it's anything over that marathon distance. So I did a 50K, so that's considered a baby ultra. which is kind of weird to say. But I thought it was like a good way to get in instead of going up into higher distances. I did consider going higher straight up. I'm like, no, Jessica, probably should start with a 50. So, I mean, I can talk about the training prior, but maybe first I'll share about the race itself just to give everyone a bit of detail. So the race was at Kosciuszko National Park. It's the highest mountain essentially in Australia. I should know how high it is off the top of my head, but I can't tell you that because that wasn't my focus on the day because the 50K doesn't go to the peak of Kosciuszko. It goes to the top of a threadbow peak called Eagle's Nest. So it was the race itself, which it was 50 kilometers, and then it had a gain of 1,300 meters. So that means like the entirety of the race, you were like going up 1,300 meters of climbing. And then there was like a loss or a descent of 1,600. So you were also running a lot of time downhill. So we went up there. The race was on the 28th. So we went up there a couple of days beforehand. It was myself running it and my friend that lives here locally, Nick, he ran it as well. So we went up, Damien, me, Nick and Claire and my mum and dad all went up together in a convoy, and our neighbour Gordy, who's like 70, which was awesome. So it was so cool to have him too. So we convoyed all the way up. We did like the full drive up to Cosy in one day, which was like 7.5, 8 hours. And then my sister and her husband came the day after and they were running the 30. So we went up, we got ourselves situated. The weather when we got there was like really bad. Like it was just so rainy and cold and like, oh God. But we still went out, and Nick, I and Claire went out and we just went to the steepest part of the race, which is right at the end, which I'll talk about a little later. Because he'd never seen the track. I'd seen the track before and been up and ran it maybe like 3 months ago. So we went to that to do just a run for the afternoon. Probably only ran up a couple of Ks and then back down in the rain. And he was like, okay, this is pretty intense. This is a lot more technical than I thought. So like we kind of did that as a bit of reconnaissance of the track and then went back, had a pretty cruisy night, like started to think about, yeah.
Can you just mention that when you say you've run it before, you haven't done the 50Ks before though, had you? Like this was yeah, so you'd been to Threadbow and trained on it when you went and stayed, but you hadn't done the whole 50Ks before. This was totally new, wasn't it?
I broke it up. So I went up and I broke it into 2 days. So I ran half of it one day. So that was roughly 25. And then the next day I ran the other 25.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I actually, that was a really great asset that I had, is I knew what to expect on the track. A lot of people do this. Like I'm not the only one. And you saw, like when I ran it, I had all these on Strava, like giving me all these little kudos for like, oh, you're first to do this and that. And as it got into last month, I kept getting all these alerts from Strava where people were like stealing my times or frequency on tracks. So heaps of people go up and do it. But yeah, that's what I had done. So for my friend, it was like, I don't even know what to expect. So we needed to go out and do a run anyway. So we just went and had a look, and it was like, okay, wow, this is for someone who just runs more marathon, not just like amazing at marathons. It was still like, okay, fuck, I've got to like reevaluate my times. Anyway, so that just led us into the next day, which was essentially going and getting our race bibs. But this is a point where we started to think about like obviously our food intake for the day, or obviously carbohydrate intake. So that can be something we can share a little bit about. But essentially from getting up that day, my focus was on like really keeping carbohydrates high. And for someone that, if you listen to podcasts a lot, you know, it's always about macronutrient balance and proteins with meals. Like this day was not a focus on protein. I still ate protein, but my meals were predominantly made of carbohydrates. So I was eating a lot of carbohydrate dense meals. I think I had like a big porridge for breakfast and took off a lot of the usual toppings I'd usually do. Big bowl of pasta for lunch with like a tiny little bit of chicken or something in it. And then I was drinking lots of coconut water and adding lots of extra salt, even on top of what I usually do. I didn't actually take any like electrolytes this day. I did it all more food based. So lots of bananas, lots of coconut water, lots of salt. I did take some Carmex. So I took some like magnesium in that regard. So I was kind of getting all of my electrolytes through food and then with just taking some additional magnesium, but definitely super carb heavy. And I was so carved out by the end of the night. But we picked up bibs and my sister had arrived by this point, so it was really exciting to go and do that. We were the only ones that when we went to collect bibs, like it was hectic. There was hundreds and hundreds of people. We were the only ones that wore a mask in there, and it just felt so weird. Like I thought that particularly the elites like would have masks on, just like paranoid about getting sick at the last minute. But we were out of hundreds of people the only ones that wore masks. I thought that was interesting. I felt really like self-conscious about it. And then when I ran into my sister, she was like, "Oh, wow, that's very 2020 of you." Like, shut up.
Oh, so Kirst didn't have a mask on. You and Damien did.
No, it was me and my friend that was running it.
Oh,
both.
okay, yeah.
At the 50, we had them on. Because I had mine and I was going to put it on and I was like, oh, no one's got a mask on. And then he pulled his out and I'm like, oh, I'm going to put mine on too. And then we went in and everyone's like, who are these weirdos?
These guys have got germs.
So we picked up our stuff and went back, and nerves were building. Like they were really, really building. Got all our stuff ready for the next day. We had to organize. So I organized all of my fuel the day before. My fuel had been organized for ages, but literally sat with Damien. We put together all of the little bags for each spot that he would be able to see me. So essentially, guys, with these ultra events, you have aid stations where they'll be set up at certain parts where they're either aided by crew, so you can have a crew to give you something, or they're not allowed to have crew, but you can still go in and get like water, electrolytes, food that they have there if you want food. So I had worked out my nutrition as far as like what I wanted him to give me. So we were getting all of that organized, writing on it. Damien is so OCD, and I don't say that as in like just loosely. Like I'm sure if he went and got diagnosed, he would be OCD. So he had spreadsheeted the shit out of the whole day, like where we all had to be, where my friend's partner who was crewing him had to be. Like everyone got spreadsheets. It was such a running joke about Damien's spreadsheets anytime it like fell behind. But he is the best person to have doing something like that because he just has everything organized to like the nth degree. So we got all of that done, got all our gear out, so all ready to go. And we all went to bed really, really early. Hardly slept at all. I was
going to say, how'd you sleep? I wouldn't have been able to sleep.
It was harsh. Luckily, the night before I did sleep, I didn't expect to sleep so well. And they do say that like your second night is the best night to get the sleep. Does that make sense? Like you would never expect to sleep the night before the race, but the night before that is if you can get a good night's sleep there. So it felt like I didn't sleep at all. We got up at like 4:30 and just were zombies into this little kitchen, just slamming down. I had like some gluten-free muffins with banana and honey and just like a really light scraping of peanut butter, just trying to keep the fats minimal and just carbs high. It was like eating sand. It was so hard to get down. And water. I did still have my matcha. That did not. But we're kind of in silence eating the food. Everyone got ready, got in the cars, convoyed. So the race started at Perisher, which is at Kosciuszko, you've got different ski fields. So it started at Perisher. We got there about half an hour beforehand. Before I went, before we left, I did go to the loo. Like, I'd weed heaps. And I was so paranoid that I wouldn't be able to have a poo. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And then finally I did. But once we got in the car, the nerves were so high, my stomach, I was just like, oh my God, I feel like I need to go again. And I was just like, what if there's like lines for the toilets when we get there? And I was reading something on my phone that was like the last day of the training. I'd been doing like a Sally McRae 50K ultra training plan, and the day of the race she'd had this blurb. Oh my God, I could read it, but I won't. It's just so emotional. I was reading it in the car. It's very generic as to anyone that's done their 50K, and it's like, you're here, this is a day, this is what it means. And I'm like, bawling.
Oh my God.
I was so emotional. Like, Damien was like, I have never seen you as emotional as you've been up here. I was a mess. Like, my emotions were all over the place. Like, I was so nervous, and it was just everything had escalated to this one point. Like, this had been, all year of training for this one day. So we got there and I was like, I definitely need to wee. And we went down to the start line, and there was the toilets there, like the portaloos, but there was massive lines. I'm like, oh no. So me and Nick and Dad, we were just like, stuff this. We went behind where the start was into this other area, and then we saw other people walking around there. I knew there was loos back there, and we went to have a look, and they were shut. So we were like, stuff this, let's just go piss somewhere behind a bush. So we went just rogue and just pissed behind a shed. But luckily at this point, that feeling of like needing to go and have a poo again had gone. And I'm like, I'm just going to have to literally suck it up. Like, it's gone for now. Like, there's nowhere to go. Hopefully I'll be all right. So yeah, we went back to the start line. And I think once I got to the start line, I felt a little better. Like, it was like, okay, I'm here, and the energy. I put myself in probably the middle of the pack as far as all the people. There was 800 or 900 people that did the 50K. So I'm like, I want to be in the middle of the pack. The start of this year, I did a race where I put myself too far up, and that really screwed me because I got caught in a really high pace. But in hindsight, I should have put myself further up because, I kind of got stuck a little bit from being too far back. But essentially, it starts with an out and back on the road, probably about 6 to 7 kilometres, where you run on a road around Perisher. And that does help kind of seed you a little bit in where you are. But you come back, and then it hits the trails. And the trails then, and Carissa knows this from doing lots of trails herself, when you're with a lot of people, you'll get into like a Congo line, and it's really, really hard to pass in these Congo lines as far as like what's on either side. So from the top of Perisher back down to basically the first aid station is 17 kilometres, and it goes along the top of this ridge line of Perisher and then does this huge descent down this mountain into what's called Bullock's Flat. So I unfortunately was caught in a Congo line that whole time. I did get pushy, not in an asshole way, but I did like pass people. A lot of people just will stay, but I would just take where I could and try and keep passing. Luckily for me, the Congo line was running, but it would then stop and walk a little bit if there was like steps and things. And it was really frustrating because like you couldn't run as fast as you wanted to. But I just had to suck it up. Like, it was making my pace a little slower for sure, but my heart rate was really low. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is meant to be because it's going to save me for later on. But it was super hard with a descent because that's a skill that I feel like I have. And I just couldn't like go as fast as I wanted. But still got down under time. Damien had written on my arm the times for the different aid stations that were like the goals. And I still got there under time, which was roughly a bit under 2 hours, I think, at that point. Saw him, got a changeover of my gels. So I'd had a couple of gels, like got new electrolytes, new water, took a muesli bar. I was like, I'm going to try and eat a muesli bar because usually when I go out training, I can get one down, but I put it in my mouth and it was just like freaking sand. Like I ate probably 1 or 2 mouthfuls and tried to have water with it. This is as I ran off. And I ended up just sticking it in my pocket and found it later on like melted to like, it was so gross. There was no way I would ever try and do a muesli bar again, like unless it was like, a longer distance. So met him there. And then the trail goes about another 15 to 20 kilometers all the way up to Thredbo, following the river. It's beautiful. It's a lot of what you see if you see it on socials. It's probably the flattest part. It's not flat, it's still a climb, but it kind of meanders up following the riverbed. It's just so stunning. And you go all the way to the second aid station where you can meet your crew. That aid station wasn't where I thought it was. So from when we'd gone up and done the recon ourselves, where I thought it would be was somewhere else. So that really messed with me psychologically because I got there and it wasn't there. And I'm texting him going, where are you? He's like, it's further up the track. It just mentally, I just wasn't prepared for it. And it was getting really hot. So by the time I met him at this aid station, it was probably about 42 kilometers. I came in and I was like, this is so hard. I was really finding it hard at this point. Like I was feeling the fatigue in my body. I'd never ran over probably mid 30 kilometers. So I was definitely feeling it and it was hot. I definitely am not good in the heat. And I was a little behind where I wanted to be in time. And I guess also because the aid station was further up. So just mentally, right? Like I was in my head. And I met him and he was just like, everyone's behind, the elites are behind. Nick had come in and he said that he nearly dropped, but Damien and Gordy were able to keep him going. He'd like hurt his knee really, really bad. Like we joked about how he finished the race with a peg leg. I don't know how he did it. Like just kept going, didn't lose the spot that he was in still. But yeah, everyone's finding it hard. Everyone's coming in. People are dropping out all over the place. He said, particularly at that aid station, people were just DNFing, which means you just do not finish. So people were just pulling out like carnage. And for me, I was like, it was never an option. I was like, I'll freaking crawl to that finish line. I will not stop. Like, yeah, that's that sick part in my head that Carissa knows is why I think I'll definitely continue to do this, and who knows what the future will hold. But I was like, well, I'm going to keep going. So I got more gels, got more water. This part was the hardest part because it's the last of the race. It's only like, I say only, I think it's like 8-9 Ks to the finish. And you think that's not a lot, but you've got the worst climb. So you get to this area called Dead Horse Gap. And then it's this huge climb up 4 kilometers up to the top of Eagle's Nest. And it's brutal. Like it's lots of stairs, lots of rocks. And you're just so fatigued. And because it's so high, like altitude wise, like you're really against it. So I told myself when I got to there, like, I'm just like, if you need to walk. So I got there and I was just walking as fast as I could, like kind of hiking up there. And I just started feeling so sick. And I had this when I went up and did the training run. I felt sick on this area. And it's the altitude. It just screws you. So I was just like one foot in front of the other. I would not freaking stop. Like people were stopping all over the place. And I was like, one foot in front of the other, Jessica, don't you stop. Like it was so Jekyll and Hyde in my head. Every part of me on one side was like, just stop and like take a minute, like catch your breath, bring your heart rate down. And I was like, no, I'm not going to freaking stop. So I just kept pushing and somehow like the nausea didn't turn to a vomit. There were times when I thought it would. I managed to keep getting the gel and the electrolytes down when I needed to. And then I started cramping, which I've never experienced. So I'd go to make a step and my whole foot would just cramp, like stuck. And then it would move into my calves. And I was like, oh, this is weird. And I just kept going. I'm like, just stretch as I moved my legs out. I don't know how I got through it. I slammed down a lot more tailwind, which has got heaps more electrolytes in it. And I think that just got me over. But in hindsight, I should have had more. But everyone had the same problem here. They should really have had an aid station earlier because everyone was like running out of water, and it's only like 8 Ks, but it takes so long, you run out of your supplies. But thankfully I made it to the top. It was so hard. That was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, was that hill. But got to the top, and then you run. It's so stunning. You're like right at the top, and you've just got this epic view over the ski fields, and you run along the top of the mountain peak, and then you have this 3K descent. It's like vertigo at the top. You look over the edge of the top of the, what do you call the ski chair things? What are they?
Ski chair things.
Ski chair. I don't know.
Cable lifts?
Yeah, like those lifts. So it's there, but you stand there and you're like, whoa, like that's how steep it is. And the trail just falls over the side. And that for me was the highlight of the race. I flogged it. I've told Rissy this before, like I just ran as fast as I could. And everyone at this point, majority were just walking. I think people's knees were in a lot of pain. They'd like blown up a lot. So I was just overtaking everyone, which was the best feeling. And it didn't hurt. Like, again, I think it's a combo of training where I live and strength training and just having that good resilience in my legs. Like for me, that's just heaven. So I smoked it down that hill. I just had music cranking. I did fall, which if you've seen photos, I tripped over a tree root in the process, and I ate freaking dirt. Like it was an epic fall. I went down on my knees, but I landed on my head. I'm lucky, to be honest, I didn't do more damage, but thankfully no one was around. No one saw it.
I'm just so glad you didn't fucking like face plant a rock or something. Because like
oh man.
I've had a few stacks like on trails, and yeah, they're not graceful, and especially like I can imagine, because I know you so well, you would not have been fucking pixie walking or pixie running. You would have just been full pelt down that fucking hill, and that tree root would have just hit you like a brick wall, and so would the ground. I can just picture what this would have looked like. Like you're lucky you've still got your teeth.
Something was looking after me. My head, so because there's so many steps, like a lot of it, 50% of the rundown is steps, and the steps are just like a piece of like a plank of wood, you know how they'll do that with just planks just to and then fill it with dirt. So my head probably landed about, I don't know, like 2 to 3 centimeters from like landing on that edge of that plank. So I was lucky. I had that like 2 seconds where I was like, is everything okay? And then I just got up and I was like, oh, thank God. I knew my knees hurt, but there's so much adrenaline. I just kept going, and I looked down and I saw a tiniest bit of blood, but I didn't realize how much blood there was and what I'd done to myself. So I just kept going, and yeah, just like the whole thing is a descent to the finish line, and you're about 1 kilometer away, and you just start hearing the crowds, and you can hear the loudspeaker of people being called over the line, and it's such a buzz, like just hearing the crowd and then going around the final corner and like seeing the finish line. It's just, there's nothing like it. And then obviously as you're running through, like you can hear your family, and I hear Damien. Damien is the only person with an air horn, of course. Full air horn.
But I am not surprised.
Yeah, air horns, cowbell. And the thing with trail running, guys, is like cowbells are a big deal too. So lots of cowbells, air horns, people yelling and screaming your name. So exciting. I just like ran through that finish line. I wasn't as emotional at that point. I was emotional during the race. At the top of Eagle's Nest, when I made it, I was really emotional. And honestly, it was, and I've had this before. It's more thinking about my nephew and nieces. Like I just think they're just such a driver for me in all of this. And I just think about like Auntie Jess, like them being proud of Auntie Jess. And I got to the top of Eagle's Nest and started thinking about that. And I was like, freaking just like, oh, Jesus.
Oh, my God, you're going to make me cry.
And get like at the start of the race, just before it started, Damien hands me a note. And I'm like, oh no, come on. And he's like, no, it's fine. And I open it and it's from Zaya, who's my niece. And Oh my God. It was all like pictures, and it was like, go Auntie Jess, I love you. And it had like
Oh my
pictures of a
God, I'm gonna
mountain and
cry.
different parts of me, just at different stages with little world bubbles of like, oh, it was just the most beautiful thing. And I had it the whole time in my vest, and just at different points, I just put my hand on there knowing it was there to keep me going. Like it just, yeah, it's amazing, those things that drive you, and that thing people talk about, like, what's your why? Like, I do it for myself, but it's also about, inspiring those beautiful little kids, and particularly the girls. I mean, Zachy too, but like, yeah, just that you can do whatever you want. You can put your mind to anything and achieve it. So I felt that so hard, and I thought I'd cross the finish line and burst into tears, but I was just so elated and so exhausted. And I saw Damien, and he had Zachy with him, and yeah, he was quite emotional, but I was just way too, I think, elated, and just went around and just saw all my family, and it was just so exciting. And by that point, like, Nick had finished ages before, like 2 hours before me. He'd been home and showered. Like,
What?
he finished. So there was there's somewhere between 800 to 900 people in the race. He's finished 31st or 32nd out of the whole race. Like, he is good, like
He's
really,
fit.
really freaking good.
Yeah.
With a peg leg.
With a peg leg.
Yes. So he was there wrapped in glad wrap around his knee, and just seeing everyone, like, that was just so special. And my sister and brother, I got to see them come over the finish line as well in their 30s. So it was just magic. And I just, after I sat there for a little bit, I was just getting in like water and coconut water, and just saw the state of myself. There's some pretty good photos. Like, there's one of me in a chair where I'm just like, that is
there is one that was posted. I think it might be the one you're talking about, in a chair, and you kind of just like look at it. Fucked.
My face just says it all.
It does.
I'm just looking.
And I love that, because they're not like, the whole point of these things and these events is they're not polished. Like, this is like you said, it's just so raw, and you push yourself to this fucking level that no one will really push themselves to. And then to finish it. Yeah, I loved that photo. That literally, the fucking dirt and blood pissing out of your knees. You look. I also love the one, I think, where Kirsty had a beer. I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, we had beers at the finish line. Yeah, someone handed her one as soon as she walked there, and she's like, oh, I don't know. And so she cracks it and has a sip, and she's like, no, yes, actually. Which is literally the first thing that she had.
I don't know if I could
just
do
very
it.
trail running.
Yeah. I've got a lot of like friends that do some of the big mountain bike cycling things too, and like on the terrain, not like cycling, but mountain biking, and that's what they do. They reckon they just finish and just fucking smash a few beers and then just collapse.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, so I think that's, the rest of that was sort of like by 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So the whole race for me, it took 7.5 hours. So I was really, I was happy. I was so happy with the day. I definitely am really proud of the day and what I did. I did go into it with expectations as far as what I'd like to do, and I feel like I was going well with that until I hit from that last aid station on. But that last aid station on was something I'd never experienced, and the cramping and the nausea and stuff. So the fact I had to walk that hill, that 4Ks, really took time away from me. But honestly, I really don't I thought that I'd be down on myself about that, but I so am not. Like, I went into it thinking if I could finish between 6 to 6.5 hours, that'd be like phenomenal. But I really was like, it's probably going to be more like 6.5 to 7. So the fact that it was 7.5, with like how the day went and how brutal it was for everyone, I was really, really happy with that. And I didn't even care about where I came. It's like just about where I am. I don't even know. I couldn't tell you exactly overall. I know it was Damien had a look, and he's like, you were front of like the sort of like the front of the pack, the middle of the pack, and the back of pack is often the way it's referred to. And I was right at the front of the middle of the pack, and I was which this is pretty cool. I don't even think I told you, Rissy. Out of my age group, I was ninth,
Oh,
came like top 10 in my age group. So I was pretty stoked about that. Like Damien told me again, he's like looking it up. And I'm like, but how many were there in my age group? He's like, no, there's pages and pages. Like you're on the front page and then you have to go through all these other pages. And I was like, freaking hell, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
That was really like a bit of icing on the cake. But yeah, like I think that's probably the summary of the race itself. There was a lot of just, refueling afterwards, essentially. You often don't have an appetite after these events. Like you have pushed your body to such an extreme, like your appetite is just shut down. So there is just getting the food back in and knowing that you have to, which as a nutritionist, like is kind of a handy skill. Like you know what you need, what to focus on, like you know why you don't feel hungry. So you're just like, well, I know I need to still get fuel in. I could see how if you didn't understand that, you'd be like not eating. And you could kind of put yourself in a hole. But I guess the last thing I say before we get into the questions is that, ate pretty well that night. But the next day I was stoked with my recovery. Like I didn't have any fatigue at all. I definitely was sore as like, you know, my knees were quite sore. I was tired. I felt like I'd had a really big workout at the gym and I'd overdone it. That's what it felt like. But we still got up the next day. We went out and watched the 100K and the 100 miler, like still had a full big day. It was heaps of fun. I was just so stoked that I wasn't fatigued because in the past I have, and I put that down to good nutrition, like number one, and also obviously, you know, the fitness levels and so forth. But I reckon nutrition is the biggest factor. So I think I might, end that there and then let you hit me with any questions.
Yeah, cool. I feel like the nutrition side of it could almost be like maybe even a podcast, but almost like, I don't know, like a blog post or a guide that you could do for people. Because I know in my friend circle and client base, like we were just chatting about beforehand, there's so many people I know that do this kind of stuff. I would say not so much the ultras like what you're doing, but the marathons definitely, and those upper level of marathons and big trail runs. And I just think I don't see people recover like you have, like the way you're explaining it to us on Saturday night. I know. Yeah. And even for me, I haven't done what you've done. So even I don't have that firsthand information to give to people. Like I've done trail runs, but I think most I've done is 17 Ks. You know what I mean? Like I haven't even done a half marathon in that space. So, you know, so I think that would be so valuable for people because I think so many people just don't feel properly before and don't feel properly after. And, you know, and like all the training you do with the gym train. Anyway, I think that would be really valuable for people. So just more work for you, Jess, if you can put that document together.
No, I so agree. I think it is a whole, there's subjects when there's all of that in its own right. You know, the strength training combining with something like this is just, to me, it's just critical. Like it's, I can't imagine a world without putting the two together where you would get the same results, and particularly as a female, as far as like keeping on top of your health overall and keeping your strength, like how it supports your metabolism throughout, because you have these training runs where your metabolism goes into a bit more of a shutdown, and like running is more like your metabolism will adjust to running and kind of slow things down, whereas like the weight training kind of balances that back out again. But keeping up that muscle mass as a female, particularly at our at our age, or anyone over like, well, I think anyone, particularly if you're over like 30 to mid 30s, 40s plus, like just so crucial. And it really did make the world of difference to my ability to like move out there, not get sore, and then recover. The nutrition again is huge. Like we could definitely talk about that other points, and I definitely would love to do a blog post on that. But I think just overall what I would say is that definitely understanding your carbohydrate demands, and that's going to change from person to person, but understanding what you need, not only within the race day itself, but with your training all the time. So you're always well fueled and leading up to the race and afterwards. But definitely during the race, like I trained so much over this year, and so much of it was training with like around the fuel, like learning what works for me, because there are certain guidelines that you do need to find what works for you and what works for your gut and where you sit as a female versus maybe a male, or just at your particular weight and what your body needs. So I really did experiment with that. I used my favorite gels in the end were the Pure Sports Nutrition. Like they just are more of like a liquid gel, and I find them easier to get down. They're not as claggy. And they've got good, like a variety of flavors for not getting pellet fatigue. So that was really good. But like I found I needed to get in at least, I would say 60, hopefully 60 plus grams of carbs an hour. If I could get over, that was great. And that was between a couple of gels in the hour and definitely my liquids, which was the Tailwind in the majority, which is a carb drink with electrolytes. And then sodium wise, I was mainly relying on my sodium and electrolytes in the Tailwind. So I was making sure I'd get down a certain amount of that per hour. I'm a really sweaty person. So I know and I learned this in training, like my salt demands are a lot higher. So I think that's what got me on the day too. Like the salt, I really should have had some additional salts and I didn't. So usually like, if I was getting about 300 or 400 milligrams of salt an hour minimum, that would work. But I think depending on the heat in the day and so forth, you can have more. Some people take so much more than that. And it's a working process, but I think a lot of people go in and they underfuel because you don't feel, it's not like you feel hungry. And if you're pushing yourself, the last thing you want is to try and get down this like gel. It's horrible. It's not enjoyable. Like you've just got to get it down. And when you need that as fuel, but it's a psychological game. Like I've definitely done it where I'm just like, I set alarms in my watch and it goes off and I'm like, oh, just give myself 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. Because I'm just the thought of it, you're just like, it's just really hard. But yeah, that amount of carbs and making sure as you get deeper into the race that you keep going. Because then if your stomach turns, which mine started to do, that's even harder because you feel sick and then you go and try and put it in and you vomit it up and then you're in trouble. So yeah, it's such an art, which I obviously love, with what we do. But I definitely will look at next year putting more of like a blog post together, for sure.
Awesome. Let's hit you with some of these questions that people sent through. Okay, well, this is probably a good one to lead on to, and probably just similar to what you were saying. Why do a lot of the pro athletes, and I don't, I'll just read the question out. Why do a lot of the pro athletes have Coke and processed food when you see them training, I'm guessing? What are your thoughts on this, and is there a better option? Like, obviously, you know that there is because you were just talking about it.
There is and there isn't. So there's a few things in there. So yeah, the aid stations will always have a mix of different fruits. They'll always have lollies, and they'll always have like Coke, flat Coke, water, electrolytes. The reason there's so much processed food is that when you have such high calorie demands and you're burning through so much, you need to be getting the calories back in. Like I was just talking about like meeting those demands, and you need to be looking at what those higher calorie options are. But also when you are pushing your body to such an extreme, you need quick available energy sources, which is essentially sugar. And you don't want fiber. That's just a nightmare for a gut that's like not digesting. You don't want protein. You don't want fat. There's a debate. Protein actually, there's a whole other thing around that, particularly with longer distances. But say something like this, you don't want protein. Quick available fuel. Think about it just like a petrol stop to just put that sugar into your system.
Which is why Coke is such an easy. It's sugar. It's caffeine. And it's liquid, right? Like I know. With some of my clients, when and people that are more in our health space and they're going out doing bigger events. They're not ultras like what you're doing, but just bigger trail running events, and they're dying in the arse at the 14K mark in the heat. And I'm like, you need glucose. They're like, oh no, I can't have that. I don't want sugar. And I'm like, you need it. Like you need to look at the tailwind with the glucose in it, or carry some red frogs or a gel. I'm like, you can't expect to just keep going with no available sugar. Like it's sorry, I just said
no, it's so true. It's exactly true. And that's the other thing with something like Coke is it's caffeine. So a lot of people will use caffeine. So you'll get to a point in your race, and if you've practiced this too, some gels will have caffeine in them. Some of mine had caffeine. So you'll use it in gel, or you might use a caffeine tablet, or Coke, as Carissa just said, it's like this mix of caffeine and sugar and liquid. So for trail running or marathons or any of these events, it's like liquid fuel. What do I think about it? Like, I totally get it. Have I used it? No, I haven't. I'd like to try it, but I'd never done it in training. So I'd never ever do it in a race, or I've never had it before. My sister did, and she hasn't had Coke for like ages, and she said it was just the best thing ever. The first one she had, but the second one she threw up. So people swear by it, but they also talk about having it flat so the bubbles don't upset you as much. But essentially, you need highly available carbohydrates, and that usually in our kind of culture is more accessible through processed foods, which is things like lollies and soft drinks and so forth. Now, you can do it outside of that if you wanted to, but it's still going to be simple sugars. So you can get gels. The ones that I use have still got sugar in them. They've got some like fruit juice bases. There's some gels that are made with like honey and maple and like apple sauce and so forth. So you can do things like that. And then, do you need Coke? Like, you don't need Coke. You could do it with caffeine in other ways. I mean, I've ran races without caffeine. I personally, when I have it, weirdly don't feel the caffeine, which blows my mind because I'm so sensitive to it, but I'll have it and I'm like, where's that kick? I don't know why. I just don't feel it.
Your match is so fucking strong that it's probably the same as me having a triple shot of caffeine in the morning. So
that's so true.
Coke doesn't even touch the sides, mate.
But it does like my brain from a gut point of view does have concerns about the use of Coke, particularly over the longer events, and how that could affect your stomach. I think there could be, I totally get it, but I think there could be I do think there's probably better ways to go about it than Coke. But I also understand that you could be out there and it's the only thing that you can get down, and that's all that sees you through. You've got to remember, guys, that majority of the time this processed food and so forth is only in the realms of the race. They're not eating like this all the time. No. If they are, then that's another problem.
I also think that there's a lot of people, I think we were talking about this on the weekend, there's a lot of people that do these types of races. And I know I've got a couple of clients, they're not necessarily interested in the health aspect of what they can get out of their body. They literally are driven to go and run a race for whatever their reasons are. And let's face it, ultras are addictive. Anyone who's in that space, it's an addiction. Like, you guys, once you've done it and you've got a taste for it, it's like a sickness, right? Like,
we call it the sickness.
It's a sickness. But and I think even just people that go and run like a lot of marathons, I'm not saying all of them, but I know I've got clients or clients' partners sometimes, and even just Mick's got some friends in this circle and stuff. Like, these guys don't really care about the health aspect. They want to do the event. They're not really super interested in all the fueling, all the, the stuff that Jess is so passionate about. And I would be so passionate about it if I was in that space. Like, they're not really that interested in it. They just want to go and run the race. They're competitive as fuck. They want to get a good time. They will jack themselves with whatever the fuck is legal to do it and do the race, collapse the end, smash some beers, have a couple of days of recovery and just get on with their life and plan their next race. Like, it's not really about how can I really look after my body? How can I get the best out of my body in this process too? So, there's that element, I think that's worth considering as well, that, not everyone really cares as much about their health while they're doing it. So,
and I think that's where the longevity and something like this would come from too. Like, if you're not treating your body the best nutritionally, like besides the day itself, but around that, and just generally, then yeah, you're going to start to have problems. That's why people do start to like get injuries or get like heavily fatigued or start having health issues, because they're not supporting their body correctly. Because it's the load on your body, like physically, is huge to do. It's not just the day itself. That day is mental. Like you don't go out and run 50 Ks or 100 Ks every day. That's just not something that you do. But the training that you do is still epic, like as far as what you're asking of your body every week. So if you're not looking after yourself, it's a recipe for disaster.
And like you do see it. Like I know when I'm out like walking trails these days, I come across a lot of people that are obviously, you know, diehard runners, and you can pick the ones that's bodies aren't really responding super well to it. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. I'm just saying that purely because as a health professional, I assess people when I look at them. I don't need to do it, but I fucking do. I look at your skin. I look at your hydration. I look at your lean muscle mass. I look at you. There's so much we do just as a natural assessment that is just built into us as health professionals, that when I see some people, and women particularly, sometimes out running, and I'm like, I'm just like, geez, like your muscle breakdown is insane, and you know, you can just see like it's taken its toll on their body. They love it, which is beautiful. They found something they're passionate about, but I can also see the toll sometimes it has taken when you've been doing stuff like that for a long period of time. Like you can see the health versus probably the need for more health in that space. When people have been doing it for a period of time. So
that's it. I feel like too, that's, you know, our good old friend protein, like talked a lot about carbs today, but like as far as longevity and particularly in endurance, like there's such a lot of people just think about carbs in this arena and don't really understand the importance of protein. And it's like, man, if you're pushing your body this hard week after week and asking this much, you better be getting your protein requirements into.
And strength training and building that lean muscle, not just, you know, living in a completely catabolic state all the time. Like,
exactly.
All right, next question, Cox. What is the ideal preparation of months to train for a race like this? It's a good one, isn't it? Because
it is a good one. I think so. The training plan that I used was actually a 4-month training plan, and I thought that was really doable. Now, in saying that, I went into it with a base level of training. So I think if you're generally a runner and you're used to running at least sort of maybe 4 days a week, and you have generally a level of fitness from that, you could take on a 4-month training plan, and I think you could absolutely do it without question. But if you hadn't done really much, like if you're maybe more sedentary or you're more like a gym person, I'd probably add another 6 to 8 weeks to that and make it more like 6 months just to get like some base work in. I think that's totally achievable. I mean, I was already training at the beginning of this year and doing some other races. So I had that sort of base level, but I really did kick it up a notch when I started that 4-month plan. So I reckon 4 months, anywhere between 6 to 4 months.
Yeah. Awesome. Did you shit yourself? Do we want to say who that question's from?
Shannon Stokes sent in some pearlers, and I wouldn't imagine it any other way. Did you shit yourself?
Did you? Well, I'm just going to read them all out so you can answer them as a collective. Did you wee yourself? Did you shit yourself? And why are you such a badass bitch? Why are you such a badass? Sorry, badass.
Oh, God. So I didn't shit myself. I was worried I would, but it just went away, that feeling, once I started. There was a few times, I think when I was climbing up, where I got that sensation and I was like, oh no. And then it just would go away. I did nearly shit myself once in training, on a training run where I tried a new carbohydrate drink. This is why you try new things in training runs, not on races.
In training.
That was a bad one. I was looking for somewhere to run off to and I couldn't find anywhere. But when I stopped, and I think just rested for that sort of 10 seconds looking, the feeling subsided enough, but that was scary. So to date, I haven't actually shat my pants. I didn't wee myself either. I luckily found I was in transition between aid stations, and there's this like camping ground, and I saw this guy duck out because you guys, it sucks. They just run off and just piss just with such ease. So annoying.
I camp. I know how easy it is for guys to piss versus girls. It's just
so annoying. But yeah, I ran literally past a small toilet block. It was like a little shed, and I'm like, oh my God. So I just ran. It was like a meter. I just stepped off the track, went into a drop toilet, weed, came out. I only weed once in 7 hours.
Yeah. Crazy, just shows how much you're sweating out, hey, versus intake.
And when I finished, I don't remember. I don't think I weed until we got back. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. So that gives you an idea. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. And why you're such a badass. Shannon, you're an Shannon also said, what did she say? I don't know if that one was on there.
I actually was going to ask you, like, because it says, can I come on the next one? Yeah. So Shannon would like to know if she can come and run 50Ks with you. I just want to know, like, what's the time frame and could I walk it? Do I have to run?
No, you could. There's different races have different cutoffs. Yeah. So you just have to meet certain cutoff points, and some of them are done to be really lenient for people who want to walk. So there was groups
of people with injuries or disabilities like myself.
Yeah. There was like groups of women like in their maybe like 60s, and particularly in the 30Ks and so forth. Like people definitely walk them. And I say cutoffs, like it doesn't really matter. It's just about getting a medal if you want to come in under cutoffs. You could still do it and like not make a cutoff. They wouldn't give you a medal, which is kind of rude, but you can totally do it.
I'll be like, guys, I've got a bone disease. I can't physically run.
Exactly.
Give me my category and I'll just come. So Shannon would like to know if she can come on the next one, but that's the question.
Yep, she so can. Well, I said to her, I think I might have put this in an answer on the socials, like with the high distances, you often get into using paces. So I'm like, careful what you wish for, Shan.
From Christine, what level of crazy do you need to be to do this type of thing? What level of crazy, Jess?
I actually don't. I don't know. I think I might have said this to you guys. Like,
I don't think it's crazy. I think it's fucking great.
I honestly, I've heard people say this before I did it, and I was like, yeah, right. But I honestly think to a point, like the average person, like who's got a generally good health, can do something like this. It's just about like commitment of time. As that other question said, like how long? Like if you want to do something like this, like it's just committing the time to doing it, and you'll get there. I don't know whether, like, because I feel like when people talk to you about it, they're just like, or you have to be a particular type of person to do that. Like, I could never do that. And it's like, well, you actually could. Like, Damien could do it if he wanted to, but he just doesn't want to. Yeah. So I think the crazy is just like you have that thing. It's that thing in you that is like, could I do that? Like, I'm like that personally. I'm like, well, that sounds like it's an amazing thing, or could I achieve that? I'm like, well, let's see. I think sometimes people are like, I don't know if I could, so I won't. Yeah. But I don't have that. I'm like, could I? Well, let's see. That's probably the crazy switch.
I also think that I like the fact, because again, I feel like I know you quite well, and you are quite competitive with yourself. And quite a competitive person by nature. And that's great, because that's the kind of thing that gives people the drive to go and do these things. But I like the fact that you finished this race not in the time that you had sort of put on yourself, and you're still so proud of yourself, because I think so many people who have got your competitive drive, I'm not like that. I will 100% go and do something like it, but I don't give a fuck where I come. I'm just happy to go in the fucking race. Yeah. But I know your personality, you put that time on yourself. You expect to finish in a certain time. And so I was kind of like, oh, well, I still think what you did was fucking fantastic. I didn't know what time you set on yourself, but I was also like, I hope when Jess finishes this, she doesn't have any fucking disappointment in herself, because I know, like, that's just your personality as well. But to hear you say that you're still so proud of yourself, I'm like, yes, Jess. Jess. Jess.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
hard, right? Like you do, like you
Yeah.
put a lot of pressure on yourself to do things and do them really fucking well. That's why you're a CEO of a fucking business. That's why you have a successful nutrition clinic. That's why you could go and run a fucking 50K marathon because you know, that's what you do. So you still did like so fucking amazing. So yeah. All right. Next question before we both get emotional and cry is over how proud we are of you. And I think this is a good one because you and I were talking about this when you did start getting into trail running is tips for feeling safe when you're on your own training. Because obviously you're out in the fucking sticks. Yep. I know I've done a lot of this, not to the level that you've done, but I have had a lot of moments where I feel unsafe out in the bush doing things. And I know now that I've got this leg thing, I was literally saying to Mick, like, I don't have the confidence in my ability to be out in the forest anymore on my own because I can't run away, like if there's an attacker sort of a thing. So, or anything like a snake or all the things that, and I know you've had to overcome like your own little snake fear as well, not snake fear. Let's not minimize it. But I think this is a really good question because you are like, I watch where you are. I stalk your fucking stories. I watch where you are out in the middle of buttfuck Idaho, up in some trail, 20 something Ks in and you get fucking lost. Like, I'm watching from Brisbane like a psycho. No, so yeah, tips for feeling safe because I think this is really important as anyone out training. But as we know, there's been all the Mount Coot stuff that's happened in the last year, and I know so I think it's a really good question.
Such a good one. I've been hit up. You'd be amazed how many people have dropped into my DMs with this question. People, women, like for good reasons. Yeah. So there's actually quite a number of things. One is my training's it's not erratic, but it's like erratic in my choices of where I go. So I am never really in the same place at the same time week to week. So if someone, like if we're talking actually a person, was like watching you or like kind of stalking you in that capacity, which is totally what can happen, it would be very, very hard to anticipate she's going to be here at this time. Like I can wait here in this part of this trail and I know she's going to come along. So I actually think that's like first and foremost, like mixing that up is important. I do also try to pick certain trails to a point. Like I definitely know this doesn't always happen, but some that I know that there'll probably at some point be other people on. I have been conscious of like where I choose sometimes or don't go because it is so remote. Then I always am connected back to Damien, like as far as I always have my Garmin. He's connected to my Strava and my Garmin. So I make sure I've got my Garmin and my phone, and basically he gets alerts as soon as I start a run, and he can follow me. So at any point he can see where I am. And then the Garmin has an inbuilt kind of alert on it too. So if something happened, whether like I fell or like just anything that happened, you can hit it and it'll send an alert. I feel really bad saying this because Carissa told me months ago, and Damien and I've talked about it. We still haven't get it. I have to get an what are they called? EPIRB. We've like he needs it for sailing when he gets back into that too. So that's the next big thing that I need, because the problem too is with trail running, sometimes you drop out of reception. And then that's been some of the scariest things that I've experienced, particularly ironically in Queensland, in Springbrook, where I was out of reception. I didn't know where I was running out of water. It was the worst training day of my life that day. I was texting you.
Drink the creek water, you'll be fine.
I was panic texting Carissa saying, are you sure I can drink this water? Because I was like out. She's like, drink it, you're fine. Yeah, so that I don't have and I do need, but I feel very good being connected back to Damien and him knowing where I am and if something happened from that point of view. In saying all of that, I still know that there is a risk. I do feel like where I live is a good place to a point. Like I don't feel like it's a strongly high risk zone from as far as what happens out this way, but I still feel every time I go out on some of these bigger trail runs, like an element of like being aware of my environment that I know that a male wouldn't consider, which I've had lots of conversations with friends about as a female, that you just have to be hyper aware. So I'm also, if I do pass other people, like particularly a male on his own, I'm very quickly, like I just take it in. I'm like, do they look like a runner? Or are they just randomly like walking up here in like a tracksuit? Or I don't, like, sometimes you see people and you just have a bit of a weird feel. So I just keep, so I'm very conscious of where they are in my scope. And I like stand, I know maybe this sounds weird, but I think it helps. I remember hearing Sally McRae talking about it. Like I stand strong, or like I move with like intention. So I'm not sort of cowering, like I'm just like hold this sort of like strong force still in how I'm moving. Like it's just being like, don't fuck with me, essentially. I have carried things in the past. I don't carry things anymore. And then I think as far as like snakes go, that's probably the thing that is, you know, people definitely, that's very scary to think of that, but snakes are the reality, really. I have definitely had encounters with snakes along the way, but I always have snake bandages on me. I have sometimes gone out without them on shorter runs, and I'm trying to get better at that, because it's not like a snake knows the difference between a long run and a short run.
She's only on a 5K run. I'll leave her alone.
Yeah. Like if I'm on certain trails, I think, oh, there won't be one. It's like, come on, Jessica. But I always take 2 if I can. And that used to be a thing too until I had my first aid this year. I spoke with the first aider guy about it. I had this weird thing about, like, if I get bitten by a snake, like, you know, again, they've got to, how do you deal with that? You're 2 hours up a mountain, and just the thought of having to get like rescued out of there, I was mortified by. And he's like, don't worry, there's just a bunch of people sitting around bored as on their shift, and it's something for them to do. I'm like, okay, that actually made me feel better.
So what their job is.
Yeah, I just make sure I have what I need on me as far as if I get bitten. But just be conscious too, like, just, it's going to be a hot day. It's summer now. There's certain trails that I will avoid in the day, whereas like there's a trail I want to do tomorrow, but I won't do it unless I go in the morning, because it's just asking for trouble to do those particular trails where there's so much debris on the ground, like you just can't see. Like, why go and do that on a mid-20s day when there will be snakes?
I remember this one time I was running down a fire track, and same thing like what you were sort of, obviously not probably the intensity of running down the side of Kosciuszko, but I had my pace up and I was just like literally sprinting, and right across the track, like, and I probably only saw it maybe like 5 or 6 meters in front of me, was a massive red belly just stretched across the whole track. There's no fucking way I was stopping. I had so much pace up, and I just kind of did a short step and a long jump and jumped over the fucking thing, and then stopped, nearly had a heart attack. Like it just didn't even
move. I bet you didn't even move.
Didn't even care. Like I'm not scared of snakes, but I'd still obviously don't want to be bitten by one.
No.
But they just come out of nowhere. But
and they're often doing what you said. Like when I do see them, they're usually just laying across a trail, just sunning themselves.
Yeah.
So you've got to be pretty unfortunate for it to happen.
Or come across an aggressive breed. Like, I think you're more likely, honestly, to get bitten when you're shuffling off to the side trying to have a wee somewhere and you piss one off, more so than, like I've come across a lot of them on like hikes and stuff like that. And quite often, even if you just stand back, because obviously when you're hiking, you're only walking, you just give them time and space and they'll just move along. They're not interested, they're just crossing. Yeah, but I think a lot of the time, like when I've come across snakes, more so just out of the blue, it's when I've actually been moving scrub or something like that. Yeah, and I think that's where you're probably more likely to get bitten, unless you accidentally are running and stand on one, or it comes out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's just a risk factor. I guess every sport to its point has a risk factor. And as a female, unfortunately too, you know, like, I hate saying unfortunately, but it's just something that we need to
you have to
consider
think about it.
And just be smart about it. But also I'm not prepared to not do what I want to do because of that fear. Look, if something happens to me out there, at least I die doing what I love. That's what I think. I know that's pretty morbid for the end of 2024, but it's what I love doing. So,
and I don't think that should stop us just because we're females and there's there's like a risk, you know. I've said to Mick that, like, obviously now that I'm starting to work out some capacity with my leg as to what I can do, I want to get back into my longer, I know I'm never going to trail run again, but I know I'll be able to walk, and I can walk. So I should be able to get back into my longer walks and hikes and things like that. But I still don't have the confidence now to do them on my own. Like, I always had this confidence about myself that I'm fit, I can run, and I'm pretty fucking strong for a girl, but I can't run now. So I can't kick either, like, because of the weight. Anyway, so I've sort of said to Mick, I've lost that confidence to be able to go out in the bush on my own now, because if something were to happen from an attacker point of view, I don't have the confidence in my own ability now. I know I still don't really stand the chance against a guy Mick's size. Like, Mick can hit me and hold, but I know that I'd have a fucking good fighting chance, and I'd like to think my Staffy would help me, but let's face it, she just fucking run off and leave me. But I like the fact that at least if I've got her with me, you know, she might scare a few people off. But I actually said to Mick, what I'm going to go and do next year is, because again, I'm not going to stop doing what I love just because of an injury. Like, same way you're not going to stop doing what you love because of a potential. Like, so I'm going to go and do just some really basic self-defense, like Krav Maga. Mick said would be really good. You just learn how just the right types of throat punches, groin kicks, things like that to really just be able to get away from someone. So if something does happen in the event, like, you know, that you need to be able to use it. And so I said, I think I'm just going to go and do something like that so I get my confidence back as a female. Like,
I so agree. It's hard too, because like, if you look at the statistics of like, you know, how many every day, hundreds and thousands of women are going out and trail running every day. Like, you know, like so many women are just doing it without issues. But there are these incidences that have happened, and particularly in Australia this year, where, it's just like, it's still that, well, what if? There's still a percentage that you have to consider.
I also think, though, too, it's exactly what you said. It's not sometimes the likelihood of it happening. It's how you feel in the situation. Like, I know before all this stuff happened, like, I could jog past a guy. I might get the heebie-jeebies a little bit if I'm deep in the bush and I'm on my own and I've got Zaylee with me. But I still felt confident enough that, you know what I mean? Whereas when it's when you don't have that confidence. So, but I still think it's unfair that we should even fucking feel like that. But we do. I don't think there's anything we can do to get around it, but we shouldn't stop doing what we love because of it. So
and a lot of women, like, there's trail running podcasts I listen to that are done by women, and if this issue comes up, like, every female has a story. Like, they might not be, you know, obviously they're not all horrific like in their endings, but everyone has some sort of dodgy story, like, of something that's happened to them. And interestingly, whether they're in the trails or they could just be a block from their home in the city, like, where something's happened. So what a good note.
Well, let's not end on that. Let's not end on that. I should have picked that question and gone with it first. How do you... But it was a good question, because I think I agree with you about, like, I know when I've done a lot of my big hikes and walks and stuff, I drop out of range. So I think an EPIRB, like just a little personal EPIRB, if anyone doesn't know what they are and you are into this stuff, you don't need a big fucking boat size one. You just can get these little personal things. They GPS track. So if something happens and you hit it, it will give your exact location as to where you are. And people can come and fucking find you. Like that dude who bloody... I think he did get found, passed away, fell off the side of, was it Biawa the other day or something?
Oh.
He was hiking it was a couple of Sundays ago. It was like a 38-degree day and he went missing.
Oh.
Like, I can't remember if it was Mount Biawa. It was one of, I'm going to always say them wrong, but it was one of the hard ones. And he just, I think, unfortunately, I do think they did found him.
Wow.
But just little
he
things like.
Had something like that.
Something like that. He's obviously, like, it was so hot that day. I don't know the circumstances, but I imagine he might have just got so hot, dehydrated, disorientated, fallen off the side. Because, some of those glasshouse mountains are fucking mental. But anyway, let's not end on bad notes. Doing the gloom over here. Stop it, Carissa.
Oh, God.
Jess has just gone and achieved this amazing milestone, and I'm just bringing it down to the depths.
Scary. Everyone was feeling really motivated. Now they're just shit scared.
Now they're just terrified.
Well, I can say I haven't had any. I've had moments where I've been more aware than others, but my biggest threat to date has really been snakes, and probably if I fell and something happened. But I'm pumped. Like I said that I guess just to finish it off, like I said I wouldn't book another race until I had done this race, and I wanted to see how I felt because I thought I wanted to keep going and I wanted to keep seeing what I could do. But I was like, do the 50 first, Jess, and see how you feel. So yeah, I finished it, and I definitely said, like, probably about 10 times that day, you know, this is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I just kept saying it. But it was also one of the most amazing things I've ever done in my life. So I'm so pumped for next year. Like I've officially signed up for Buffalo Stampede, which is end of March. It's called a Sky Marathon. So like I was saying, you know, this is a marathon. It's roughly 42. I think it's a bit over in Mount Buffalo. So it's a huge climb and then a massive descent, which I'm excited about. I'll do Trail Fest again, which is here in Warburton, which is awesome. If you're close by, you should come and do that. It's anyone listening, it's the best. They have all different distances. So that was my first ever trail run I ever did. It's 30 Ks-ish, and I want to redo it because just to see how far I've come. And I went into that race with such a lack of understanding about fueling. I did it on nothing, realistically, just water. So I'm so keen to see the difference with that. And then my big goal next year is to do 100, not miles yet, but I'd love to do 100K, whether that's at Kosciuszko or somewhere else. I'm not sure yet. They're just starting to talk about Kosci and socials again. So yeah, I think that's going to be next year. I feel like that the way I did about when I signed up for the 50, I was like, oh my God, like, could I even do that? So now it's like, well, I felt that feeling before. Let's ride that all year and smash out 100.
Smash out 100. Woo! Love it. Love it. Love it.
But we should wrap this up because I think you've got a client in like 4 minutes. So
in 4 minutes, I do.
I hope everyone's enjoyed this. If you have any further questions, particularly about this topic, like as we said, we'll do more next year, and I can definitely look at doing some content on the website for this too. So please just let me know. Share the podcast. You know, we love it when you guys do that. It helps people find us. But really, I think otherwise, like, thanks for just being with us this year. We know we've been really topsy-turvy this year with the podcast, probably a bit more than even ever. But we're excited for next year, and we've got a lot of big ideas, haven't we, for the podcast next year?
We do. We've got lots of big ideas for the podcast next year. So we can't wait. We'll have a lot more dropping next year. This year has been a little bit slower, but that's my fault because I just wasn't doing as many with Jess. So my fault.
I don't know about fault. Sometimes life just happens, as we've shared on the podcast this year.
Shared. So. Yes, exactly. But no, thank you to everyone for listening. Yeah, we love that you guys listen. We love if you guys share our podcast. If you have any directions you want our podcast to go in, like other things, like Jess and I can talk about gut stuff and hormone stuff and health stuff to the cows come home, but we are so open to what you guys want to hear. I think, you know, there's so much stuff we can talk about, so much that we talk about outside of, you know, this space as well. So if there is anything that you're like, geez, I'd love you guys to cover off on this, just let us know if it's appropriate, or even if it's fucking not, we'll talk about it. JCN X-rated, you know, whatever it might be.
X-rated. Oh God, I love it. Yeah, we'll have an amazing Christmas, everyone. I hope you get some downtime. I know it's a crazy time of the year, but yeah, we really wish you the best over the holiday season and can't wait to chat to you again in 2025.
Enjoy, everyone. Bye.
Bye.